welcome to Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today we are very excited to welcome Jack and Paul and little Oscar. They're going to share their journey of adopting through Adoptions from the Heart. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you start from the beginning of when did you first come to Adoptions from the Heart? What was your expectation of what this journey would look like?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
We knew that we wanted to build our family through adoption for several years, and we actually started attending a variety of informational sessions with different agencies in 2022.
Okay.
It was spring of 2022 when we started sort of gathering information, and then relatively quickly we identified Adoptions from the Heart as being sort of a good balance of a number of factors for us, and started to pursue the full process with you guys. So that was in fall of 2022.
And what specifically were you looking for when you were looking at different agencies in terms of values and the goal of building your family through adoption?
I mean, we were certainly looking for agencies that have worked with families that look like ours. And we also, I think, one of the things we liked about Adoptions from the Heart is it was a smaller agency, but still worked in a relatively large geographic area. We had friends that had worked with national adoption agencies, and then some that are like really, really small. And I felt like Adoptions from the Heart was nice somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because oftentimes people will look at the differences between agencies that are licensed across the country versus just a select number of states. Talk to us about local services and what it meant for you to be able to actually come into an office, sit down with a social worker in person, maybe what that would mean for birth parent services down the road versus maybe working with an agency that did things more virtual based.
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly the answer to your question, but I knew that, like, you know, if we were planning on pursuing an open adoption, you know, being paired with a birth family that was closer geographically to us would just make, you know, upholding some of those agreements a little bit easier.
Sure.
And I think that's sort of lucky. We live in Philadelphia, so just down the road from where we are now. And knowing that Adoptions from the Heart was sort of had a larger area, but at the same time was kind of focused in that Philadelphia area. So, you know, potentially up to Connecticut or down to Virginia, but always sort of within a sort of radius around where we currently live was another sort of thing to recommend it. And then we actually did a lot of our work virtually with you guys initially. And
COVID, right? You were still in the
Yeah, we were still like at the tail end of COVID, yeah.
And you know, actually, it was nice to have both options because we both have jobs where it can be a little bit difficult to sort of get time off together. You know, for those courses and whatnot that we took earlier in the process, and it was nice to be able to talk to agents, you know, interact with both of the agents that we worked with over the process in person, whether at our house or here. But then have some of those classes where we saw a bigger group of folks who were working with Adoptions from the Heart, all up and down the seaboard.
Yeah. You mentioned the educational classes, which is a requirement here at Adoptions from the Heart. Can you speak on that a little bit of what that prep work meant for you, specifically the transracial adoption course, as you are a multicultural family at this point? Talk to us about what that class did for you in preparing for building your family and being placed with a child of a different race.
I mean, I think for me it was, you know, I don't know families that have, you know, had a transracial adoption, and for me it was just very eye-opening because there were just a lot of things that I hadn't thought of or considered or you know, done my homework on. And so I think that class was really nice and that it was eye-opening, taught me a lot of the things that, you know, that we're going to need to think about as we build our family this way. So I thought it was very valuable. There are things that I think about from that class up until this day, and I think we'll continue to build on and think about.
And I'll just add that we live in the city now. As I said, we lived in Chicago for many years before moving here in 2020, and we both work in healthcare. We work in really, you know, very large, diverse work settings. And so I think we had certain assumptions about, what it would be like undergoing a transracial adoption, and, have, again, interacted with people with all different types of backgrounds for many years now. But it did help us think through it more sort of methodically and intentionally, and appreciate that, it's not just a matter of, being comfortable interacting with folks of different races. It's really, how intentional can you be, and how dedicated can you be to surrounding yourself, like, at all times with, folks who come from different backgrounds and look differently from you, and, making sure that you also have answers and ways to talk about those things with a child who's not going to know, everything that you know as an adult.
Sure.
It's also given us a lot of tools to talk with our friends and family about it, and what that experience is like, and, kind of helping them understand what, maybe his experience will be versus our experience, and, kind of how to approach those things.
Yeah. You guys hit on a lot of important reasons why we developed the course, and I think people sometimes think, well, I took the course, great, check that off, I'm done, now I can move on. But it's really just a starting place, right? It's a conversation, it's kind of a opening your eyes to things that maybe you sort of knew about, but like you said, weren't very intentional about. And it's an ongoing process. It doesn't mean you took the course and now everything's great and done and now you can go on to becoming the best parents, right? It's making sure that you continue that conversation, continue the education, continue making sure you put yourself in spaces that challenge you as parents, so that you can try to build your family to be what you want it to be for your son.
Right, and to, like, access tools, and for us, we found books, we've found other individuals that have helped us along the way, and like you said, it really did feel like a jumping off point.
Wonderful. Talk to us about how long you waited until you got the call for little Oscar.
We got listed in June of 2023, and then we got the call in January of 2024, so about 7 months.
Not very long.
Not very long.
And what did that feel like to, realistically start going down that path of getting the call? And was it an emergency placement for you, or did you?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So what was that like?
He was 2 days old when we got the call, and we got him. He came home with us on day 3, and so it was a whirlwind. I think we were prepared for it to be a whirlwind, and there's only so much preparation you can do, but we were very excited. We were very ready, and it was just a wonderful experience, to just be in the hospital and get to meet him for the first time was very special.
If there's any advice you would have for our other families who are preparing for placement, like things you really hadn't thought of, or just something they should really be focused on?
I think we had indicated on our forms that we were open to an adoption from 0 to 36 months.
Okay.
And although we knew that it was most likely that we'd have an infant, like a newborn, just based on the numbers that you guys have, we wanted to, be open to that entire range. And so we bought certain things, but didn't buy other things. We didn't really have a lot of clothing or, what else? I think we had like some bottles, but, and ultimately it did work okay. I think, the nice thing about an emergency adoption is, you do have, it feels like it's a rush, but if you have a list, if you have, some knowledge of the things that you would need, even if you don't have them all in hand, there are plenty of places to get things. And so we actually, were able to, with like having a car seat, and having a bassinet, we really were able to sort of get the rest of the stuff at the last minute.
I think there's only so much preparation you can realistically do. It's just, sometimes it just make do.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it depends on the person and personalities and you know how anxious people are. I know more of our type A personality clients want to have as much prepared as possible, but you have to do what's right for you. For some folks, that allows them to have more control in the situation, but for other folks, it's like too much to deal with right now, and they decide to wait and maybe just get the basics, as you mentioned, and then the rest can kind of be put together. But there's not as much as you think you need for a newborn,
yes,
right?
That's true.
And you can kind of pick up the last minute things at the hospital.
Yeah.
How did
And one thing I'll add about the emergency adoption that we both liked, it's, you know, I think there's something really special about being able to sort of go through the process with somebody, but it's also nice to just get a call that there's like a healthy baby who's waiting for you.
Yeah, there's certain stresses in that too, yeah.
So, you know, we both, we were open to either. You know, we, again, similar to the numbers for, you know, newborns versus slightly older kids, we knew it could be either, but there was a good chance that we might have an emergency adoption, and we had tried to prepare ourselves for either, but I think that neither of us were sad per se that, you know, when we finally got that call, that it was like, ready to go.
And it's interesting because I think most folks who come to us initially very scared and worried about what will this look like for an emergency situation, they don't want to do it, are the ones who end up loving it afterwards. They're like, oh, less time to be anxious, just kind of a quick, okay, here we go. Not as much time to think through all of the what ifs. It's kind of just you go into mode, get there, and just move right along. What did it mean for you to have the agency there supporting you at the hospital and kind of coordinating everything for you as you were moving forward to prepare for discharge?
I mean, we certainly wouldn't have been able to do it without them. I mean, it was just so nice to know that when we got there in the morning that there'd be somebody there to kind of walk us through the process. And, you know, as overwhelmed as we felt and as overwhelmed as, you know, kind of everything sort of moving at us at once, it was just so nice to have somebody there to be like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and, you know, this is how the birth mother is feeling, and this is how you might want to approach that situation, and then we're going to move, you know, to the next step. And so, you know, as overwhelming as it was really nice to have someone there to guide us.
Good. And that's kind of the point, right? Because there's so many moving pieces when you're dealing with a potential adoption. It's nice to have people in your corner making sure that they're doing all the coordination, providing birth parent services, making sure they're being counseled appropriately, all of that.
And that was one of the like really special things too, is we really did feel like, you know, the birth mother was being taken care of in this whole process, and that, you know, her needs were being addressed in a way that, you know, I think was very thoughtful and meaningful to her as well.
And speaking of birth mother, what type of open adoption do you guys have, and what are your expectations for the future in terms of connection to birth family?
So our agreement with the birth mother was 2 visits a year, and then photos and letters. And, you know, we've been sending all of those, and we've invited her for a couple in-person visits. We haven't heard back about that yet, but you know, that's certainly an invitation that we're going to continue to extend, and you know, hopefully in the future we can build that relationship.
Wonderful. Did you guys have a chance to meet her?
We did.
Oh, you did?
In the
Did you meet at the hospital? Great. So it sounds like you met her, you have been sending pictures and letters, you have an agreement for 2 visits, she's just not quite ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, speaking with our social worker, that apparently is a pretty common experience. And, you know, so I think that, again, having that sort of feedback, and it's like not necessarily something we're doing wrong, but just maybe we need some more time to hopefully build that relationship in the future.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say that's actually really common, what you're describing, especially in just the idea of birth parents having to kind of go through the grief and the loss and the processing of what happens when you place a child for adoption. I think it's important for folks to remember that the way that they are going to uphold their commitment to openness is you're going to continue to send those pictures and letters, continue to offer the visits. You know, I always say at the end of your letter, always make sure that you are reinforcing that whenever you're ready, we're ready to have a visit. And that allows you to leave the door open if and when she decides to come through. And for little Oscar, he will know that his parents always kept that door open. And that's a big part of the openness. Even if you're not actually having the visits, because birth family may not be ready, you're still committed to it. And continuing to put that into your correspondence is the way that you show that. So I think that's really great that you're still, ready and willing whenever she's wanting it, even if it's 5-10 years from now, which does happen. We had a birth mom that just had a visit after 7.5 years. She was getting the pictures and letters, but she was just more reserved, more quiet. She wasn't emotionally ready to handle an in-person visit. And she finally got to that point where she was opening up and said, yeah, I'm ready. And it was a beautiful visit. And she was so happy that the family was patient with her to be given that time to kind of go through what she had to go through to be ready for that contact.
Yeah.
So again, very common, very normal, and we want folks to keep that in mind when they're thinking about their open adoptions and down the road what life will look like, because it's hard.
And I think one of the things that Adoptions from the Heart does that's great is you guys have the barbecue, that like, it's sort of a lower stress, potential encounter. So one of the things that we've been able to do is invite her to that, and again, hopefully in an environment where there are other adoptive families there, so that she doesn't maybe necessarily feel the same pressure. It might be an easier opportunity for her to do an in-person visit.
Absolutely.
It's also been nice writing the letters in that we now have these like markers that we might not have had for each month, and the way we approach them, I guess the way that you guys recommend is talking about some of the different changes and things that we're seeing as he gets older. And now we have this little like portfolio, this little collection of different timestamps, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it kind of forces you to sit down and be intentional about his growth and
it's
how
almost
he's
like
doing.
a journal.
Yes, and keep copies of all of that. I
Yeah.
always tell families, keep copies of that for your kiddos so that they can see the letters that you were writing, and 20 years from now he'll be able to look back on that and see that you were still committed to it, and it's just a nice way to kind of look at his life and know his story. So that's great. Any final thoughts, words you'd like our community to know, something that's important to you as a family?
I guess I would say that we, at various points, have felt various types of anxiety.
Sure.
Before, during, and after the adoption. And, I think with all parenting, there's this tendency to sort of go in a worst case scenario type of direction. So, that's not necessary. So not you can stop yourself always, but, things do often work out, and having you guys, I think it is almost underappreciated if you've never been through the process, just because you have seen many such scenarios play out. And I think, we might have hesitated a little bit in reaching out to our agents. And I don't think we needed to do that. And when we ultimately did ask more questions as we got a little more familiar with the process, or as we moved through and started to worry about our portfolio or about, the key that we were using or any of those things, it was always helpful to touch base with Sheila, or our first agent, and just make sure that they didn't think there was anything that needed to be changed.
Sure.
And Sheila was always good about.
Just having that somebody there who's helped families through it before was just so reassuring, because it was like all the anxieties that we experienced were normal.
Well, and it's hard because this is a journey. There are a lot of ups and downs, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because people always wonder whether they should choose the agency route or maybe an attorney route, right, where you do things more privately. And ultimately, you have to do what's right for you and your family. But I always say to folks, like, you have to remember, the agency is here to support you. We're your backbone. Use us. Yeah. It's kind of a two-way street, right? It's not just us being there for you, but you have to be reaching out to us as well if you do want that support. Because some of our families are a little more reserved, and they kind of just go through the process, and then they sit and wait, and then they're placed, and it just is what it is. But if we don't know that there is a need, it's sometimes hard to navigate that support. So I think it's nice that you connect with your social worker. Building a relationship with your social worker is one of the most important parts to this journey, in my opinion, because having that connection and knowing that somebody's in your corner through the good and the bad is really helpful. And it should be organic. It shouldn't be like a business transaction kind of deal. it should be authentic. And I think it's important that you have the right relationship and the right social worker to be there for you. So that's a great point that you bring up. Anything else that you want folks to know? We're very happy for you and your little one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. I mean, I think like you said, we felt very supported throughout this journey, and you know, it's a complicated process. It's not easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, wonderful to hear. And we always say we can't predict what the journey is going to look like, but if you stick with the process, stick with our agency, you will ultimately be placed with a little one in the end. So we are very happy for you and thankful that you could share with our community so folks can learn more about the process from clients themselves. And that's the reason why we do this AFTH TV, is to make sure that your voice is heard, and we appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. Continue to tune in to future episodes.